It was Noli, just doing some promo. Give me one sec. Yeah, you can hear me. Ew. The fact that Sleepy's allowing me to announce in the server is kind of crazy. Okay. So let's get Watson. How are you doing today, Noli? Javelin, thank you for the follow. You are just in time. Tonight, we're reading The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. And I hope the fireplace is a nice ambiance. I just actually set up a new command. If you do exclamation mark book, I'll tell you what book we're reading tonight. So that's a fun little thing about it. Let's see if anyone else wants to hop in, and then we will start reading. Let's get right into it, shall we? Well, let's turn the mic down a little bit. That should be a little bit better. Chapter 1, An Unexpected Party. In a hole in the ground, there lived a hobbit. Not a nasty, dirty, wet hole filled with the ends of worms and an oozy smell, nor yet a dry, bare, sandy hole with nothing in it to sit down on or to eat. It was a hobbit hole, and that meant comfort. It had a perfectly round door like a portal, painted green with a shiny yellow brass knob in the exact middle. The door opened onto a tube-shaped hole like a tunnel. A very comfortable tunnel without smoke, with paneled walls and floors tiled and carpeted, lighted with polished chairs and lots of pegs for hats and coats, for the Hobbit was very fond of visitors. The tunnel wound on, going fairly, but not quite straight into the side of the hill. The hill, as all the people for many miles around called it, and many little round doors opened out of it, first on one side, then on another. No going upstairs for the Hobbit. Bedrooms, bathrooms, cellars, pantries, there are a lot of those. Wardrobes. He had a whole room devoted to clothing. Kitchens, dining rooms, all were on the same floor, and indeed on the same passage. The best rooms were all on the left-hand side, going in, for these were the only ones to have windows, deep-set, round windows looking over his garden and the meadows beyond, sloping down to the river. Okay, sound up a little bit higher, like something like this, maybe? I don't know. This is better. Thank you. Alright. Where were we? Sloping down to the river. This hobbit was a... Almost forget. Hello, One Graph, how are you? This hobbit was a very well-to-do... Gotta shift my mic. This hobbit was a very well-to-do hobbit, and his name was Baggins. The Bagginses had lived in the neighborhood of the hill for time out of mind, and people considered them very respectable, not only because most of them were rich, but also because they never had any adventures or did anything unexpected. You could tell what a Baggins would say on any question without the bother of asking them. I'm doing just fine. Thank you for tuning into the reading tonight. This is a story of how Baggins had an adventure and found himself doing and saying things altogether unexpected. He may have lost the neighbor's respect, but he gained... well, you will see whether he gained anything in the end. The mother of our particular hobbit... was it a hobbit? I suppose hobbits need some description nowadays, since they have become rare and shy of the big people, as they call us. They are, or were, little people, about half our height, and smaller than the bearded dwarves. Hobbits have no beards. There is actually little to no magic about them, except the ordinary everyday sort which helps them to disappear quietly and quickly when large stupid folk like you and me come blundering along, making a noise like elephants which they hear a mile off. They are inclined to be fat in the stomach. They dress in bright colors, mainly green and yellows. Wear no shoes, because their feet grow natural leathery soles, and thick warm brown hair like the stuff on their heads, which is curly, of course. Have long, clever brown fingers, good-natured faces, and laugh deep, fruity laughs, especially after dinner, which they have twice a day when they can get it. Give me 1 second. Going to slash. Yeah, fuck that. Nope. Ben. Christine. Sorry about that. And laugh deep, fruity laughs, especially after dinner, which they have twice a day when they can get it. Now, you know to go enough to go on with. And as I was saying, the mother of this hobbit, of Bilbo Baggins, that is, was the famous Belladonna Took, one of the three remarkable daughters of the old Took, head of the hobbits who lived across the water, the small river that ran at the foot of the hill. It was often said, in other families, that long ago one of the Took ancestors must have taken a fairy wife. That was, of course, absurd, but certainly there was something not entirely hobbit-like about them, and once in a while members of the Took clan would go off and have wonderful adventures. They discreetly disappeared, and the family hushed up, but the fact remains that the Tooks were not as respectable as the Baggins, though they were undoubtedly richer. Not that Belladonna Took ever had any adventures after she became Miss Bungo Baggins. Bungo, that was Bilbo's father, built the most luxurious hobbit hole for her, and partly with her own money, that was to be found under the hill, or over the hill, or across the water. And there they remained to the end of their days. Still, it is probable that Bilbo, her only son, although he looked and behaved exactly like a second edition of his solid and comfortable father, yet something a bit queer in his makeup from the Took side. Something that only waited for a chance to come out. The chance never arrived until Bilbo Baggins was grown up, being about 50 years old or so, and living in the beautiful hobbit hole built by his father, which I have just described for you, until he had in fact apparently settled down immovably. By some curious chance one morning long ago, in the quiet of the world, when there was less noise and more green, and the hobbits were still numerous and prosperous, and Bilbo Baggins was standing at his door after breakfast, smoking an enormous long wooden pipe that reached nearly down to his woolly toes. Gandalf came by. Gandalf, if you only heard a quarter of what I have heard about him, and I have only heard very little of all that there is to hear, you would be prepared for any sort of remarkable tale. Tales and adventures sprouted up all over the place wherever he went, in the most extraordinary of fashion. He had not been down that way under the hill for ages and ages, not since his old friend, the old Took, had died. In fact, and the hobbits had almost forgotten what he looked like. He had been away over the hill and across the water on business of his own since they were all small hobbit boys and hobbit girls. All that the unsuspecting Bilbo saw that morning was an old man with a staff. He had a tall, pointed blue hat, a long gray coat, and a silver scarf which his long white beard hung below his waist, and immense black boots. "Good morning," said Bilbo, and he meant it. The sun was shining and the grass was very green, but Gandalf looked at him from under his long bushy eyebrows that stuck out further than the brim of his shady hat. "What do you mean?" he said. "Do you wish me a good morning, or do you mean that this is a good morning, whether I want it to be or not? Or that you feel good on this morning, or that it is a morning to be good on?" "All of them at once," said Bilbo, "and a very fine morning for a pipe of tobacco out of doors, and into the bargain." "If you have a pipe about you, then sit down and have a fill of mine. There's no hurry, we have all the day before us." Then Bilbo sat down on a seat by his door, crossed his legs, and blew out a beautiful a gray ring of smoke that sailed up into the air without breaking and floated away over the hill. "Very pretty," said Gandalf, "but I have no time to blow smoke rings this morning. I am looking for someone to share in an adventure that I am arranging, and it is very difficult to find anyone." "I should think so in these parts. We are plain quiet folk and have no use for adventures. Nasty, disturbing, uncomfortable things. Make you late for dinner. I can't think of what anybody sees in them, said our Mr. Baggins, and, and stuck one thumb behind his braces, and blew out another, even larger smoke ring. Then he took out his morning letters and began to read, pretending to take no more notice of the old man. He had decided that he was not quite his sort, and wanted him to go away, but the old man did not move. He stood leaning on his stick and gazing at the hobbit without saying anything, till Bilbo got quite uncomfortable and even a little cross. "Good morning," he said at last. "We don't want any adventures here, thank you. You might try over the hill or across the water." By this he meant the conversation was at an end. "What a lot of things you do use good morning for," said Gandalf. "Now you mean that you want to get rid of me, and that it won't be good until I move off." Not at all, my dear sir. Let me see. I don't think I know your name." Yes, my dear sir. And I do know your name, Mr. Bilbo Baggins. And you do know my name, though you don't remember that I belong to it. I am Gandalf, and Gandalf means me. Do you think I should have lived to be good morninged by Belladonna Took's son, as if I were selling buttons at the door? Gandalf, good gracious me, not the wandering wizard that gave old Took a pair of magical diamond studs that fastened themselves and never came undone until ordered? Not the fellow who used to tell such wonderful tales at parties, about dragons and goblins and giants, the rescue of princesses, and the unexpected luck of widows' sons? Not the man that used to make such particularly excellent fireworks. I remember those. Old Took used to go have them on Midsummer's Eve. Splendid. They used to go up like great lilies and snapdragons and laburnums of fire and hang in the twilight's evening. You will notice already that Mr. Baggins was not quite so prosy as he liked to believe. Also, that he was very fond of flowers. Dear me, he went on. Not the Gandalf who was responsible for so many quiet lads and lessons going off into the blue for mad adventures, anything from climbing trees to visiting elves, or sailing in ships, sailing to other shores. Bless me, life used to be quite you used to upset things badly in these parts once upon a time. I beg your pardon, but I had no idea you were still in business." "Where else would I be?" said the wizard. "All the same, I am pleased to find you remember something about me. You seem to remember my fireworks kindly, at any rate. And it is not without hope. Indeed, your old grandfather Took's sake, and for the sake of poor Belladonna, I will give you what you asked for." "I beg your pardon? I haven't asked for anything." "Yes, you have, twice now. My pardon, I give it to you. In fact, I will go so as far to send you on this adventure. Very amusing for me, very good for you. Profitable, too. Very likely, if you ever get over it. Sorry, I don't want any adventures, thank you. Not today. Good morning. But please come to tea, any time you like. Why not tomorrow? Come tomorrow. Goodbye." With that, the hobbit turned and scuttled inside his round green door, shut it quickly as he dared, not to seem rude. Wizards, after all, are wizards. "What on earth did I ask him to tea for?" he said to himself as he went to the pantry. He had only just had breakfast, but he thought a cake or two and a drink of something would do him good after his fright. Speaking of a drink of something, I have my own tea. Gandalf, in the meantime, was still standing outside of the door and laughing long, but quietly. After a while, he stepped up and, with the spike of his staff, scratched a queer sign on on the Hobbit's beautiful green front door. Then he strode away, just about the time when Bilbo was finishing his second cake and beginning to think he escaped adventures very well. The next day he had almost forgotten about Gandalf. He did not remember things very well, unless he put them down on his engagement tablet. Like this: Gandalf Tea Wednesday. Yesterday he had been too flustered to do anything of the kind. Just before tea time there came a tremendous ring on the front door bell. Then he remembered. He rushed and put on a kettle and put another cup and saucer and an extra cake or two and ran to the door. "I'm so sorry to keep you waiting," he was going to say when he saw that it was not Gandalf at all. It was a dwarf, with a blue beard tucked into a golden belt, and very bright eyes under his dark green hood. As soon as the door was opened, he pushed inside just as he's been expected. He hung his hooded cloak on the nearest peg, and "Dwalin, at your service," he said with a low bow. "Bilbo Baggins, at yours," said the hobbit, too surprised to ask any questions for the moment. When the silence that followed had become uncomfortable, he added, "I'm just about to make tea. Pray come and have some with me." A little stiff, perhaps, but he meant it kindly. And what would you do if an uninvited dwarf came and hung his things up in your hall without a word of explanation? They had not been at the table long. In fact, they had hardly reached the third cake when there came another, even louder ring at the bell. "Excuse me," said the hobbit, and off he went to the door. "So you've got here at last." Is what he was going to say to Gandalf at this time, but again it was not Gandalf. Instead, there was a very old-looking dwarf on the step with a white beard and a scarlet hood, and he too hopped inside as soon as the door was open, just as if he's been invited. "I see they begin to arrive already," he said. He caught sight of Dwalin's green hood hanging up. He hung his red one next to it, and "Balin, at your service," he said, with his hand on his breast. "Thank you," said Bilbo with a gasp. It was not the correct thing to say, but "they have begun to arrive" had flustered him badly. He liked visitors, but he liked to know them before they arrived, and he preferred to ask them himself. He had a horrible thought that the cakes might run short, and then he, as the host, he knew his duty and stuck to it, however painful he might have to go without. "Come along in and have some tea," he managed to say after taking a deep breath. "A little beer would suit me better, if it's all the same to you, my good sir," said Balin with the white beard. "But I don't mind some cakes, seed cakes, if you have any." "Lots," said Bilbo. Bilbo found himself answering, to his own surprise, and he found himself scuttling off to the cellar to fill a pint beer mug, then to the pantry to fetch 2 beautiful round seed cakes, which he had baked that afternoon for his after-supper morsel. When he got back, Balin and Dwalin were talking at the table like old friends. As a matter of fact, they were brothers. Bilbo plumped down the beer and the cake in front of them, when a loud ring at the bell came. At the bell again. Then another ring. Gandalf for certain, this time, he thought, as he puffed along the passage, but it was not. It was 2 more dwarves, both with blue hoods, silver belts, and yellow beards. And each of them carried a bag of tools and a spade. In they hopped as soon as the door began to open. Bilbo was hardly surprised at all. "What can I do for you, my dwarfs?" he said. "Kili, at your service," said the one, and Fili, added the other, and they both swept off their blue hoods and bowed. "At yours and yours families," replied Bilbo, remembering his manners this time. "Dwalin and Balin are here already, I see," said Kili. "Let us join the throng." "Throng?" thought Mr. Baggins. "I don't like the sound of that. I really must sit down for a moment and collect my wits, and have a drink." He had only just had a sip in in the corner, while the four dwarfs sat at the table and talked about mines and gold and trouble with goblins and the desperate depredations of dragons and lots of other things which he did not understand, nor did he want to, for they sounded much too adventurous when ding dong, a ling dang, his bell rang, again as if some naughty little hobbit boy was trying to pull the handle off. Someone at the door, he said, blinking. Some four, I should say by the sound, said Feely. Besides, we saw them coming along behind us in the distance. The poor little hobbit sat down in the hall, put his head in his hands, and wondered what had happened, and what was going to happen, and whether they would all stay to supper. Then the bell rang again, louder than ever, and he had to run to the door. It was not four, after all. It was five. Another dwarf had come along while he was wandering in the hall. He had hardly turned the knob before they were all inside, bowing and saying, "At your service," one after another. Dory, Nori, Ori, and Oin. Dory, Nori, Ori, Oin, and Gloin were their names, and very soon two purple hoods, a grey hood, a brown hood, and a white hood were hanging on the pegs, and off they marched with their broad hands stuck in their gold and silver belts to join the others. Already it had almost become a throng. Some called for ale, some for porter, and one for coffee, and all of them for cakes, so the hobbit was kept very busy for a while. A big jug of coffee had just been set on the hearth. The seed cakes were gone, and the dwarfs were starting on a round of buttered scones when there came a loud knock. Not a ring, but a hard rat-a-tat on the hobbit's beautiful green door. Someone was banging on with a stick. Bilbo rushed along the passage, very angry and altogether bewildered and bethwatered. This was the most awkward Wednesday he had ever remembered. He pulled open the door with a jerk, and they all fell in, one on top of another. More dwarfs. Four more. And there was Gandalf behind, leaning on his staff and laughing. He had made quite a dent on the beautiful door. He had also, by the way, knocked out the secret mark that he had put there the morning before. Carefully, carefully, he said. It is not like you, Bilbo, to keep friends waiting on the mat, and then open the door like a pop gun. Let me introduce Biffer, Bofer, Bomber, and especially Thorin. At your service, said Biffer, Bofer, and Bomber, standing in a row, as they hung up two yellow hoods and a pale green one, and also a sky blue one with long silver tassel. This last this last had belonged to Thorin, an enormously important dwarf. In fact, no other than the great Thorin Oakenshield himself, who was not at all pleased for falling flat on Bilbo's mat, with Biffer, Bofer, and Bomber on top of him. For one thing, he was very haughty, and said nothing about service, but poor Mr. Baggins said he was sorry so many times that at last he grunted, "Pray don't mention it," and stopped frowning. "Now we are all here," said Gandalf, looking at the row of 13 hoods, the best detachable party hoods, and his own hat hanging on the pegs. "Quite a merry gathering. I hope that there is something left for latecomers to eat and drink. What's that? Tea? No, thank you. A little red wine, I think, for me." "And for me," said Thorin. "And raspberry jam and apple tart," said Biffer. "Mince pies and cheese," said Bofer. Pork pie and salad, said Bomber, and more cakes, and ale, and coffee, if you don't mind, called the other dwarfs through the door. Put on a few eggs, there's a good fellow, called after him, as the hobbit stepped off to the pantries. And just bring out the cold chicken and pickles. Seems to know as much about the inside of my larders as I do myself, thought Mr. Baggins, who was feeling positively flummoxed, and was beginning to wonder whether a most wretched adventure had not come right into his house. By the time he'd gotten all the bottles and dishes and knives and forks and glasses and plates and spoons and things piled up on big trays, he was getting very hot and red in the face and annoyed. Confiscate and be bother these dwarves, he said aloud. Why don't they come and lend a hand? Lo and behold, there stood Balin and Dwalin at the door of the kitchen, and Fili and Keely behind them. And before he could say knife, they had whisked the tray and a couple of he had whisked the trays and a couple of small tables into the parlor, and set out everything fresh. Gandalf sat at the head of the party, with the 13 dwarves all around, and Bilbo sat on a stool at the fireside, nibbling at a biscuit. His appetite was quite taken away, and trying not to look as if this was all perfectly ordinary, not at all the least an adventure. The dwarves ate, and talked, and time got on. At last they pushed their chairs back, and Bilbo made to move to collect the paints and glasses. I suppose you will all stay to supper, he said in his most polite, unpressing tone. Of course, said Thorn, and after we shan't get through the business till late, and we must have some music first, now to clear up. Thereupon the 12 dwarves, not Thorn, he was too important, and stayed talking to Gandalf, jumped to their feet, made tall piles of all things, and off they went. And for anyone who wants... My book is coming apart. This is not good. Here is the illustration of the hill within the book. Seems like quite a lovely place. I do say so myself. Perhaps if it was not so, how shall I say, boring, I might want to live there myself. Waiting for trays, balancing columns of plates, each with a bottle on top with one hand, whilst the hobbit ran after them, almost squeaking with fright. Please be careful, and please don't trouble, I can manage, but the dwarves only started to sing. Chip the glasses and crack the plates, blunt the knives and bend the forks. That's what Bilbo Baggins hates. Smash the bottle and burn the corks. Cut the cloth and tread on the fat. Pour the milky on the milky. Wow. Pour the milk on the pantry floor. Leave the bones on the bedroom mat. Splash the wine on every door. Dump the crocks in a boiling bowl. Pound them up with the thumping bowl, and when you've finished, if any are whole, send them down the hall to roll. That's what Bilbo Baggins begs. So carefully with the plates. I don't know if that's the actual tune. It's the one that came to mind. And of course, they did none of these dreadful things, and everything was cleaned and put away safe as quick as lightning. Perhaps I was supposed to be safe and quick as lightning. Whilst the hobbit was turning round and round in the middle of the kitchen, trying to see what they were doing. Then they went back and forth, and found Thorin with his feet on the fender smoking a pipe. He was blowing the most enormous smoke rings, and wherever he told one to go, it went up. It went up the chimney or behind the clock on the mantelpiece, or under the table or round and round the ceiling. But wherever it was sent, it was not quick enough to escape Gandalf. Pop! He sent a smaller smoke ring from his short clay pipe straight through each one of Thorin's. Then Gandalf's ring would go green and come back to hover over the wizard's head. He had a cloud of them about him already, and in the dim light it made him look strange and sorcerous. Bilbo stood and watched. He loved smoke rings, and then he blushed to think how proud he had been yesterday morning of the smoke rings he had sent up into the wind over the hill. Now for some music, said Thorin. Bring out the instruments. Keely and Feely rushed for their bags and brought back little fiddles. Dori, Nori, and Ori brought out some flutes from somewhere inside their coats. Bomber produced a drum from the hall. Biffer and Bofer went out too and came back with clarinets that they had left among the walking sticks. Dwalin and Balin said, Excuse me, I left mine on the porch. Just bring mine with you, said Thorin, as they came back with violas as big as themselves, and with Thorin's harp wrapped in a green cloth. It was a beautiful golden harp, and when Thorin struck it, the music began all at once, so sudden and sweet that Bilbo forgot everything else, and was swept away into the dark lands under the strange moons, far over the water, and very far from his hobbit hole in the hall. The dark came into the room from a little window that opened in the side of the hill. The firelight flickered. It was April, and still they played on, while the shadows of Gandalf's beard wagged against the wall. Pardon. The dark filled the room, and then the fire died down, and the shadows were lost, and still they played on. And suddenly, first one, then another began to sing as they played, deep-throated singing of the dwarves in the deep places of their ancient homes. This is like a fragment of their song, if it can be like their song without their music. Now, here is your choice. I can either read the lyrics, or I personally know this song and I can sing them. Which would you prefer, chat? We can sing it, or we can just say the lyrics. Sorry for that. I think that I want to sing. And if you don't mind little old me singing a little tune from this book, then that is what I shall do. If you would give me just 1 second. Far over the misty mountains go to dungeons deep and caverns old. We must away ere break of day to seek the pale enchanted gold. The doors were, oops, hold on. The doors of yore made mighty spells, while hammers fell like ringing bells in places deep where dark things sleep in hollow halls beneath the falls. For ancient king and elvish lord. My throat is not acting up with the music right now. I'm very sorry. There many a gleaming horde, they shape and wrought the light they caught to hide in gems on hilt of sword, on silver necklace they are strung, the flowing stars on crowns they hung, the dragon fire in twisted wire they meshed in light of moon and sun, fought over the misty mountains gold to dungeons deep and caverns old. We must away ere break of day to claim our long forgotten gold. Goblets they carved there for themselves, and harps of gold where no man dwells. They long, and many a song was sung unheard by man or elf. The pines were roaring on the height. Pardon me. The winds were roaring in the night. The fire was red, it flaming spread. The trees like torches blazed with light. That's all because my singing voice absolutely sucks. My tea, no. Let's see, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages left. We'll make it to the end of the first chapter. As they sang, the Hobbit felt the love and beautiful things made by the hands hands and by cunning and by magic moving through him, a fierce and jealous love, the desire of the hearts of the dwarves. Then something tookish woke up inside him, and he wished to go see the great mountains, and hear the pine trees and waterfalls, and explore the caves, and wear a sword instead of a walking stick. He looked out of the window. The stars were out in the dark sky above the trees. He thought of the jewels and the dwarves shining in the dark caverns. Sorry, the jewels of the dwarves shining in the dark caverns. Suddenly, in the wood beyond the water, a flame leapt up, probably somebody lighting a wood fire, and he thought of plundering dragons settling on his quiet hill and kindling it all to flames. He shuddered, and very quickly he was plain Mr. Baggins, of Bag End under the hill again. He got up trembling. He had less than half a mind to fetch the lamp, more than half a mind to pretend to go hide behind the beer barrels in the cellar, and not to come out until all the dwarfs had gone away. Suddenly he found that the music and the singing had stopped. They were all looking at him, eyes shining in the dark. "Where are you going?" said Thorn, in a tone that seemed to show he guessed both halves of the hobbit's mind. "What about a little light?" said Bilbo apologetically. "Thank you, Ungraph." "We like the dark," said all the dwarfs. "Dark for dark business. There are many hours before dawn." "Of course," said Bilbo, and sat down in a hurry. He missed the stool and sat in the fender, knocking over the porker and shovel with a crash. "Hush," said Gandalf. "Let Thorin speak." And this is how Thorin began. "Gandalf, dwarves, and Mr. Baggins, we are met together on the house of our friend and fellow conspirator, this most excellent and audacious hobbit. May the hair on his toes never fall out, and all praise to his wine and ale." He paused for a breath and for a polite remark from the hobbit, but the compliments were quite lost on poor Bilbo Baggins, who was worst of all, fellow conspirator. Though no noise came out, he was so flummoxed, so Thorin went on. "We are met to discuss our plans, our ways, means and policy and devices. We shall soon before the break of day start on our long journey, a journey from which some of us, perhaps all of us, except our friend and counselor and the ingenious wizard Gandalf, may never return. It is a solemn moment. Our objective is, I take it, well known to us all. To a simple Mr. Baggins, and perhaps to one or two of the younger dwarfs. I think I should be right in naming Keely and Feely, for instance. The exact situation at the moment may require a little brief explanation." This was Thorn's style. He was an important dwarf. If he had been allowed, he would probably gone on like this until he was out of breath, without telling anyone there anything that was not already known. But he was rudely interrupted. Poor Bilbo couldn't bear it any longer. And may never return, he began to feel a shriek coming up inside. Very soon it burst out like a whistle of an engine coming up at a tungle. All the dwarfs sprang up, knocking over the table. Gandalf struck a blue light at the end of his magic staff, and in it fireworks glare. The poor little hobbit could be seen kneeling on the hearth rug, shaking like a jelly that was melting. Then he fell flat on the floor, and kept on calling out over, struck by lightning, over and over again. And that was all they could get out of him for a long time. So they took him, laid him down out of the way on the drawing-room sofa with a drink at his elbow, and they went back to their dark business. "Excitable little fellow," said Gandalf as they sat down. Again, gets funny, queer fits, but he's one of the best, as fears a dragon in a pinch. If you've ever seen a dragon in a pinch, you will realize that this was the only poetical exaggeration applied to any hobbit. Even to old Took's great-granduncle Bullroar, who was so huge for a hobbit that he could ride a horse. He charged the ranks of the goblins of Mount Graham in the Battle of the Green Fields, and knocked their king, Golfimboil's head clean off with a wooden club. It sailed 100 yards through the air and went down a rabbit hole. And this is the way the battle was won. And the game of golf was invented at the same moment. It seems I am now out of tea. Very fun. In the meanwhile, however, Boror's great, gentler descendant was reviving in the drawing room. After a while in a drink, he crept nervously to the door of the parlor. This is what he heard Gloin speaking. Humph! Or some snort, more or less like that. Will he do you think? It is all very well for Gandalf to talk all about this hobbit being fierce, but one shriek like that in a moment of excitement would be enough to wake the dragon and all his relatives and kill the lot of us. I think it sounded more like fright than excitement. In fact, had it not been for the sound of the door, I should have been sure we had come to the wrong house. As soon as I clapped my eyes on the little fellow bobbing and puffing on the mat, I had my doubts. He looked more like a grocer than a burglar. Then Mr. Baggins returned the handle and went in. The Took's side had won. He suddenly felt he would go without bed and breakfast to be thought fierce. As for little fellow bobbing on the mat, it almost made him really fierce. Many a time afterwards, the Baggins part regretted what he did now, and said to himself, "Bilbo, you were a fool. You walked right in and put your foot in it." "Pardon me," he said, "if I overheard the words that you were saying. I don't pretend to understand what you are talking about, or your reference to burglars, but I think I am right in believing—" This is what he called being on his dignity. "That you think I am no good, and I will show you. I have no signs on my door. It was painted a week ago. And I'm quite sure you have come to the wrong house. As soon as I saw your funny faces on the doorstep, I had my doubts. But treat it as the right ones. Tell me what you want done, and I will try it. If I have to walk from here to the east of East and fight the wild wereworms in the last desert. I had a great-great-great-granduncle once, Boror Tookin." Yes, but that was long ago," said Gloin. "I was talking about you, and I assure you there is a mark on your door. The usual one in the trade, or used to be. Burglar wants a good job, plenty of excitement, and reasonable reward. That is how it usually reads. You can say expert treasure hunter instead of burglar if you would like. Some of them do. It's the same to us. Gandalf took us that there was a man of the sort in these parts looking for a job at once, and that he had arranged for a meeting here on Wednesday tea time. Of course there is a mark," said Gandalf. "I put it there myself, for very good reason. You asked me to find the 14th man for your expedition, and I chose Mr. Baggins. Just let anyone say I chose the wrong man or the wrong house, and you can stop at 13 and have all the bad luck you like, or go back to digging coal." He scowled so angrily at Gloin that the dwarf huddled back in his chair, and when Bilbo tried to open his mouth to ask a question, he turned and frowned at him, and stuck out his bushy eyebrow till Bilbo shut his mouth tight with a snap. "That's right," said Gandalf. "Let us have no more argument. I have chosen Mr. Baggins, and that ought to be enough for you. If I say he is a burglar he is. Or will be when the time comes. There's a lot more in him than you guess, a deal more than he has any idea of himself. You may possibly all live to thank me yet. Now, Bilbo, my boy, fetch the lamp and let's have a little light on this." On the table, in the light of the big lamp, was a red shade. With a red shade, he spread a piece of parchment, rather like a map, This was made by Thor, your grandfather Thorn. He said in answer to the dwarves' excited questions, it is a plan of the mountain. I don't see that this will help us much, said Thorn disappointedly after a glance. I remember the mountain well enough and the lands about it, and I know where Mirkwood is and the withered heath where the great dragons bred. The dragon is marked in red on the mountain, said Balin, but it will be easy enough to find him without that ever if we ever if ever we arrive there. There is one point that you haven't noticed, said the wizard, and that is the secret entrance. You see that rune on the west side, and the hand pointing to it from the other rooms. That marks a hidden passage to the lower halls. Look at the map in this chapter, and you will see the runes in red. Let's see. Can I sit back a little bit? Nope, because that's the hill. Give me 1 second, and I shall find. There is no map in this chapter. I was excited about the map in this chapter. It may have been secret once, said Thorin, but how do we know that it's secret any longer? Old Smog has lived there long enough now to find anything there is to know about these caves. He may, but he can't have used it for years and years. Why? Because it is too small. 5 feet high the door, and 3 may walk abreast, say the runes. But Smog could not creep into a hole that size, not even when he was a young dragon. Certainly not after devouring so many of the dwarves and men of Dale. It seems a great big hole to me, squeaked Bilbo, who had no experience of dragon and only of hobbit holes. He was getting excited and interesting again, so that he forgot to keep his mouth shut. He loved maps, and in his hill there hung a large one of the country round, with all of his favorite walks marked on in red ink. How could such a large door be kept a secret from everybody on the outside apart from the dragon? He asked. He was only a little hobbit, you must remember. In lots of ways, said Gandalf, but in what this one has been hidden, we don't know without going to see. From what it says on the map, I should guess there is a closed door, which has been made to look exactly like the side of the mountain. That is the usual dwarves' methods. I think that is right, isn't it? Quite right, said Thorn. Also, went on Gandalf, I forgot to mention that there's a map that the map went with a key. A small and curious key. Here it is, he said as he handed to Thorin a key with a long barrel and intricate ward made of silver. Keep it safe. Indeed I will, said Thorin. He fastened it upon a fine chain that hung about his neck under his jacket. Now things began to look more hopeful. This news alters them much for the better. So far we have had no clear idea what to do. We thought of going east as quiet and careful as we could, as far as the Long Lake. After that, the trouble would begin. A long time before that, if I know anything about the roads east, interrupted Gandalf. We might go from there along the river runnings, went on Thorin, taking no notice. And so the ruins of Dale, the old town in the valley there under the shadow of the mountain. But we none of us like the idea of the front gate. The river runs right out of it, through the great cliff at the south of the mountain, and out of it comes the dragon, too far, too often, unless he's changed his habits. That would be no good, said the wizard, not without a mighty warrior, even a hero. I try to find one, but no warriors. But warriors are busy fighting one another in distant lands. In this neighborhood, heroes are scarce, or simply not to be found. Swords in these parts are mostly blunt, and axes are used for trees, and shields as cradles or dish covers, and dragons are comfortably far off, and therefore legendary. That is why I settled on burglary, especially when I remembered the existence of a side door. And here is our little Bilbo Baggins, the burglar that the chosen and selected burglar. So now let's get on and make some plans. Very well, then, said Thorin. Supposing the burglar expert gives us some idea or suggestions, he turned with mock politeness towards Bilbo. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're down to 3 or so pages left. Maybe we might play a game after this. I don't know. First, I would like to know a bit more about things, said he, feeling all confused and a bit shaky inside, but so far still tookishly determined to go on with things. I mean about the gold and the dragon and all that, and how it got there and who it belongs to and so on and so on. Bless me, said Thorin, haven't you got a map? Didn't you hear our song? And haven't we been talking about all this for hours? All the same, I should like it plain and clearer, he said obstinately, putting on his business manner, usually reserved for those people who try to borrow money off of him, and doing his best to appear wise and prudent and professional and live up to Gandalf's recommendation. Also, I should like to know about risks and out-of-pocket expenses, time required, and what remuneration and so forth. By which he meant, when am I going to get out of it? And am I going to come back alive? Oh, very well, said Thorin. Long ago, in my grandfather Thoror's time, our family was driven out of the far north, and came back with all their wealth and their tools to this mountain, Thrain, to this mountain on the map. It had been discovered by my far-off ancestor, Thrain the Old. But now they mined and they tunneled, and they made huger halls and greater workshops, in addition to many jewels too. Anyway, they grew immensely rich and famous, and my grandfather was king under the mountain again, and treated with great reverence by the mortal men who lived to the south, and were gradually spreading up the mountain. They built the merry town of Dale, and there in those days kings used to send for our smiths in reward even the least skillful most richly. Fathers would beg us to take their sons as apprentices and pay us handsomely, especially in food supplies, which we never bothered to grow or find for ourselves. Altogether, those were good days for us, and the poorest of us had money to spend and lend, and leisure to make beautiful things just for the fun of it, not to speak of the most marvelous and magical toys, the like of which is not to be found in the world nowadays. So my grandfather's halls became full of armor and jewels and carvings and cups, and the toy market of Dale was the wonder of the north. Undoubtedly, that's what brought the dragon. Dragons steal gold and jewels, you know, from men and elves and dwarves, wherever they can find them, and they guard their plunder as long as they live, which is practically forever unless they are killed, and never enjoy a brass ring of it. Indeed, they hardly know a good bit of work from a bad, though they usually have a good notion for the current market value, and they can't make a thing for themselves, not even mend a little loose scale of their armor. There were lots of dragons in the north in those days, and gold was probably getting scarcer up there, with the dwarves flying south or getting killed up there. Oh, and all the general waste and the destruction that dragons make, going from bad to worse. There was a most specially greedy, strong, and wicked worm called Smog. One day he flew up into the air and came south. The first we heard of it was a noise like a hurricane coming from the north, and the pine trees on the mountain were creaking and cracking in the wind. Some of the dwarfs who happened to be outside, I was one, luckily, a fine adventurous lad in those days, always wandering about. Saved my life that day, you know. Well, from a good way off they saw the dragon settle up on our mountain, and in a spread of flame. Then he came down to the slopes where he reached the woods, and they all went up in fire. By that time all the bells were ringing in Dale, and the warriors were arming. The dwarfs rushed out of their great gate, but there was the dragon waiting for them. None escaped that way. The river rushed up in steam, and a fog fell on Dale, and in the fog the dragon came onto them, destroyed most of the warriors. The usual unhappy story was only too common in those days. Then he went back and crept in through the front gate and routed out all the halls and lanes and tunnels, alleys, cellars, mansions, and passages. After there were no dwarfs left alive inside, he took all their wealth for himself. Probably, for that is the dragon's way. He was he has piled it all up in a great heap far inside and sleeps on it for a bed. Later he used to crawl out of the great gate, come by night to Dale, and carry away people, especially maidens, to eat, until Dale was ruined. And all for certain, but I don't suppose that anyone lives nearer to the mountain than the far edge of Long Lake nowadays. The few of us that were well outside sat and wept in the hiding and cursed smog, and there we were unexpectedly joined by my father and grandfather with singed beards. They looked very grim, but they said very little. When I asked how they gotten away, they told me to hold my tongue, and said that one day in proper time I should know. After that we went away, and we have earned our livings as best as we could up and down the lands, often enough sinking as low as blacksmith work or even coal mining. But we have never forgotten our stolen treasure. And now, and even now, when I will allow we have a good bit laid and not so badly off. Here Thorn shrugged the gold chain around his neck. We still mean to get it back and to bring our curses home to Smog, if we can. I have often wondered about my father and great-grandfather's escape. I see now that they must have had a private side door, which only they knew about. But apparently they made a map, and I should like to know how Gandalf got a hold of it, and why it did not come down to me, the rightful heir. I did not get a hold of it. I was given it, said the wizard. Your grandfather Thorir was killed. You remember in the mines of Moria by Azog the goblin. Curse his name, yes, said Thorn. And Thrain, your father, went away on the 21st of April, 100 years ago last Thursday, has never been seen by you since. True, true, said Thorin. Well, your father gave me this to give to you, and I have chosen my own time and way for handing it over. You can hardly blame me, considering the trouble I had to find you. Your father could not remember his own name when he gave me the paper, and he never told me yours. So on the whole, I ought to be praised and thanked. Here it is, he said, handing the map to Thorn. I don't understand, said Thorn, and Bilbo felt like he would have liked to say the same. The explanation did not seem to explain. Your grandfather, said the wizard slowly and grimly, gave the map to his son for safety before he went to the mines of Moria. Your father went away to try his luck with the map after your grandfather was killed, and lots of adventures of a most unpleasant sort he had. But he never got near the mountain. How he got there, I don't know. But I found him a prisoner in the dungeons of a necromancer. Whatever were you doing there? Asked Thorn with a shudder, and all the dwarves shivered. Never you mind, never you mind. I was finding things out as usual, and a nasty, dangerous business it was. Even I, Gandalf, only just escaped. I tried to save your father, but it was too late. He was witless and wandering, and had forgotten almost everything except the map and the key. We have long ago paid the goblins of Moria, said Thorian. We must have given thought about it, the necromancer. Don't be absurd. He's an enemy far beyond the powers of all the dwarfs put together. If he could all would all if they could all be collected again from the four corners of the world. The one thing your father wished for his son to read the map and use the key. The dragon and the mountain are more than big enough to task for you. Here, here, said Bilbo, and accidentally said it aloud. Here what? They all said, suddenly turning towards him. He was so flustered that he answered, hear what I have to say. What's that? Well, I say that you should all to go east and have a look around. After all, the side door and the dragon must sleep. There is a side door, and the dragon must sleep sometimes, I suppose. If you sit up on the doorstep long enough, I dare say you will think of something. And well, I don't know, and don't you know? I think we have talked long enough for one night, if you see what I mean. What about bed and an early start to all of that? I will give you a good breakfast before we go. Before you go. Sorry. Before we go, I suppose you mean, said Thorn. Aren't you the burglar, and isn't sitting on the doorstep your job? Not to speak of getting inside the door. But I must agree bed and breakfast. I like 6 eggs with my ham. When starting on a journey, fried, not poached, mind you. Don't break 'em. After the others had ordered their breakfast without so much as a please, which annoyed Bilbo very much, they all got up. The Hobbit had to find room for them all, filled up all his spare rooms, and made beds on chairs and the sofa, but he had forgotten them all stowed and went on to his own little bed, very tired and not altogether happy. One thing he did make up his mind about was not to bother to get up very early and cook everyone else's wretched breakfast. The tookishness was wearing off. As he laid in bed, he could still hear Thorn hum to himself in the best bedroom next to him. Autumn, far over the misty mountains cold, to dungeons deep and caverns old, we must away at break of day to find our long forgotten gold. And there we are for the end of the first chapter of The Hobbit. Now we may continue on to Valorant, but give me 1 second as I have things to do. Please enjoy the fire. Alright, we have done the book, and I don't feel like ending stream quite yet, so hit intermission as we pause the cracklings of the fire, and we load up into a game of Valorant. If you give me 1 second, I'm going to I accidentally muted myself. We have just finished up the first reading. Just finished up with the first ever reading, and we are loading into Valorant now. If you'd like to continue, my throat did get a little strained as I'm not used to talking for that much. But here's what I wish to incorporate along with my streaming. I enjoy playing games, but I believe that on Mondays and Wednesdays I'd like to either do so. Actually, no, we'll make that Sundays and perhaps Wednesdays. I want to turn into reading and or just call it weird ASMR streams, which I hope to do at some point. But who knows? But now we'll be we'll be playing a game of Valorant. Hopefully still keeping this nice and calm vibe. We're just gonna be playing some Spike Rush to end off this chill stream. But now, hello everyone, how are you doing? I don't know if anyone's gonna talk to me tonight. Who knows? But in other news, I've also added another owned command to do exclamation mark Discord. That is my new Discord server, which I'm in the process of getting set up, called the Nightingale. It is very, very shallow right now. We have just a couple of small channels, but I do hope to make it better in the coming months. I'm going to probably spend next weekend working on it, if I'm being completely and utterly honest. But yes, that's what I hope to do with my time. I just realized my desktop audio was off, and I'm going to turn both of them down just a little bit, just so it's not overly loud. I just came off of reading.
One enemy remaining.
I barely had a chance to do anything. And I would like to know your guys' opinions on the rating streams. It was something I was experimenting with that I found quite enjoyable, but I would like to know your guys' thoughts.
Their tech is only as good as their skill, and
Nice job, everyone.
reloading.
Valorant's been weirdly laggy for me recently, so
For you, Hermanita.
if it's not the best quality, I am sorry. I am
Show me a target.
trying.
Making cover.
I should have known you were sitting around the corner. Cypher was last seen mid.
Light planted. Blocking sight. Wall placing sentry. Reloading. Alarm bot out. Placing swarm grenade. Placing swarm grenade. Eyes down.
Cutting their vision.
Get out of my way.
Cutting their vision.
Enemy spotted. A. Reloading.
One enemy remaining.
You stopped thinking clearly. This is for the best.
You stopped thinking clearly. This is for the
Last
best.
round in the half.
Good. Analyze.
Reloading.
Then improve.
Another thought I'd like to ask of your opinion is, like spike my bud, is should I add like soft background music to my streams?
Show me a target.
Just something people might enjoy.
Stealing sight.
Ooh, fucking Jesus, 5,000. Valorant might not happen tonight. Yeah, nope, it looks like Valorant's gonna be a no-go. This might be the end of the stream after this match.
One enemy remaining.
When did I get back up here?
Switching sides.
Yep. This
Match
is why
point.
we're playing a Spike Rush.
Head is in the guillotina. Now, boom.
Because that was unpleasant, to say the least.
Nice and easy. Turret out.
Focusing. Stopping fire.
No. The explosion
Stealing sight.
didn't hit me. It was bad.
Last player standing.
One's on A.
Spike planted. One enemy remaining.
Nice try, Jet. Yes, the baby dragon gun. That's a very nice gun.
Thanks, ISO.
No problem.
Watch this. Turret out.
Stopping fire.
Healing you.
Focusing.
There's another one at B main. They're planting B.
planted.
Blocking sight. Get out of my way. Sight.
Last player standing.
That's true.
One enemy remaining.
She's main. She's gonna try to play you for time.
Don't rush me.
Nice try, nice try.
As one.
Making cover.
Fire in the hole.
Breaking them.
Turret destroyed. Good.
Show me a target. Breaking them.
Message sent. Reloading.
I know exactly where
Who's
you are.
next?
Okay, someone behind
Your
us.
duty is not over. Reloading.
Enemy spotted.
One enemy remaining.
Nice shot, Sage.
Spike planted.
Hello. Barrier created.
My ult is ready.
GG's, everyone.
They had no
Great
right
game.
to do this.
Defenders win.
Now to mend what we have broken.
Okay. Oh, just because I don't want lag spikes like the one we had right at the beginning of that game to persist throughout the stream. This is going to be the end of the stream. I hope everyone did enjoy. If you did, follow and maybe just letting it notify you every time I'm live would be greatly appreciated. You guys mean a lot to me, and the fact that you took time out of your day to come listen to me read makes me very happy. I hope you all found this a very nice, enjoyable night, and you found a calm spot to enjoy. But for now, we are going to, Bella doesn't need it, but we're going to raid into one of my good friends. So, you may know him. No, probably. Good night, one graph. Thank you for being here, and thank you to the rest of you for being here. We're going to raid my good buddy, and adios, everyone. Have fun. Gotta hear his reaction to this.
I might walk into you. Oh my god, I feel lost.
See ya.
One enemy remaining.
Oh shit. Nice
Okay.
man.
Does he not have raid notifications set up?
No way.
Oh yeah. I'm amazing.
I got you.
Hey, buddy. Hey, buddy. That was.
Shit.